John's father was a lawyer and an FBI agent. Then he abandoned his family.
We missed him until at 8.
20 years later,
Answer my questions.
a dramatic confrontation.
Didn't you think that we might get hungry? I led a double life.
The fight to forgive. 48 hours in 1 minute.
48 hours. We take you there. When John was growing up, his father was a lawyer and an FBI agent.
He was the larger-than-life superhero.
Then he abandoned his family.
We missed him until at 8.
20 years later, John went looking for his dad. He was shocked at what he found.
And I'm standing there screaming at him, answer my questions.
Bill Lagatuda reports on their dramatic confrontation.
Didn't you think that we might get hungry? I led a double life.
And 30 years ago, Paul left an enemy soldier for dead.
That was our job, to search out and kill.
But he had taken his diary.
I could not believe what I was reading.
Now, a remarkable discovery. Peter Van Sant reports.
I believed he was dead for so many years. Suddenly he's alive, and I was going to get to meet this person.
Plus, when Tim was 15, he saw his dad murdered for $1. Harold Dow has the powerful story of a devoted son on an extraordinary mission, the fight to forgive.
Dial 102, please.
I'm Dan Rather, and this is 48 Hours. Forgiveness doesn't always come easy, even in a season of goodwill toward men. Good evening. Every one of us at one time or another has probably felt like a victim. We've been wronged or mistreated in some way. We feel betrayed. And when the hurt is deeply personal and long-lasting, finding a way to forgive is asking a lot. So it is with one family that's trying to come to grips with a disturbing past, including abandonment by a father and the anger of a son who cannot forget. Is forgiveness even possible? Or will the lasting hurt lead to revenge? Bill Lagatuda begins for you tonight with the story of a father searching for his father and searching for answers in one family's fight to forgive.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What do you say?
Happy birthday.
One present this morning, and that's it.
I'll take it.
John Dupree knows a thing or two about forgiveness and how difficult it can be to achieve.
Casey, you're the man.
He's a family man
Try it on.
with a devoted wife,
All right.
3 healthy kids,
The Electoral College convenes December 18th.
and a job as a TV news reporter based in Los Angeles.
Should be 4. Take 4.
But make no mistake, for years, John lived his life with one goal in mind:
Let's go.
to create the perfect family he never had.
And my family would not be as sad as the family I had left behind.
What time is it? Smoothie time.
My home would be a happy place.
What do you say when you burp?
Excuse me?
My kids would know their dad loves them
What did I forget?
and would never have to worry about whether their dad was going to be there for them. My family would be perfect. The perfect picture that I had imagined my entire childhood.
A long time ago, John's dad was a hero to his family. Bob Dupree was a former FBI agent who became a prominent attorney in Anderson, South Carolina.
What kind of lawyer was he?
A passionate lawyer, a smart lawyer, knew the law better than most of the judges. He practiced law before.
He and his wife, Marquise, were raising 3 sons. John was in the middle.
He was the larger-than-life superhero figure. He was everything as far as we were concerned. The smartest guy in town, the most powerful guy in town.
Did you look up to him?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mark was the oldest.
I think he believed in us, too, as individuals. And that made you feel like you were somebody when you had that from your own dad.
You and he had a different kind of relationship because you were the youngest.
Big buddies.
Then there was Daryl.
My dad had a GTO, which was the fastest car in town, you know, so that was a big brag point, and he would show you FBI maneuvers in the car and stuff like that.
Just the funnest, most gregarious, funniest guy we knew when he was sober.
When he was sober. Bob Dupree had a serious drinking problem and a mistress, and he hid both behind his upstanding exterior.
When do you remember things starting to get really bad?
I think I was about 11 years old, maybe 12. He came home one night after about a 2 or 3 day absence and just looked like hell. $700 suit, soiled and wrinkled and unshaven, disheveled, hungover. We thought he was doing another one of his routines, his comedy routines, and so we started giggling. Mom began to quiver and then cry. And what ensued that night was a horribly vicious, verbal battle between my dad and my mom.
And then one day when John was 14, it all fell apart.
I woke up one Saturday morning and Mom came out of the bedroom area into the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. And she said it. Well, your father's gone.
Just like that?
Yeah. That was it.
Bob Dupree walked out on his family.
We missed him until at 8. I mean, we'd go to bed at night, stare at the ceiling, and just cry ourselves to sleep because we missed our dad.
The boy's mother made a little money running a dance studio, but soon the family was destitute.
You know, he never called, he did not write, and he never sent money. And we had to resort to welfare to get by.
So where was the father who had left his family flat? John and his brothers would hear from Bob Dupree from time to time, from somewhere out on the road. They knew he'd lost his job as a lawyer, that he was traveling from town to town, from South Carolina to Southern California. Every now and then he'd show up for short periods of time, and then he'd disappear again, usually after borrowing money and spending it on booze and drugs. Like the time he came to stay with John, who was then working his way through college.
You had extra money from a job that he stole?
Oh, yeah, yeah. One night I came home and it was all gone. It was several $100s.
When you confronted him, what did he do?
Well, he got really vicious. How dare you accuse me of petty larceny, you ungrateful little son of a bitch. And
when Bob Dupree disappeared that time, John wouldn't see his father for nearly 20 years. During that time, John married his girlfriend Gina, got himself a plum TV job in Boston, and tried living his ideal life, except that deep down, he was filled with rage.
You'd think I would be happier than I'd ever been. But I was angrier than I'd ever been. Because I realized how screwed up my childhood had been. I realized only when I was a dad how crummy I had it as a kid. The way my dad had just left us for dead. And I had never let myself be angry about it before. I had never looked at it for what it was.
Only wrap this around that.
Just a blatant, outright failure, abandonment. And so I started taking it out on my wife. I started taking it out on my kids.
And then you have baseball practice.
I had no idea what was bubbling underneath. All I knew is that I saw the explosion afterwards, and it would just start all over again.
What you making, bro?
That Waldorf salad that Grandma liked?
Oh, yeah.
John's brothers were suffering too. Mark's marriage ended in divorce. Daryl had turned to drugs and alcohol.
At that time, I drank a lot.
And then one cold winter day in Boston, when John was anchoring the local news, he saw a startling image on videotape.
And I see an old guy standing on a manhole cover, staying warm in the steam. And for the life of me, I could swear it's my old man. Of course it's not. I have no reason to believe it's him, but this guy looks like him. I've got to go find him.
His plan was use his skills as a journalist.
I didn't know if he was alive or dead.
Where was Bob Dupree?
I had to go back and confront him.
John was about to get the shock of his life.
He didn't even know it was me. I had to say, Dad, it's me.
That's next.
When you started digging around, you found out he was living where?
I found out he was living from town to town along the Sun Belt.
By talking to family members and tracing government checks,
It took 6 months.
John Dupree finally found his father Bob in San Diego. He hadn't seen him for 20 years.
I was terrified. I was as nervous as I've ever been about anything. And as soon as I saw him about a half a block up the street on Broadway, I shouted at the cabbie, "Stop, let me out here."
John's first reaction was to take a picture of his father.
He was standing out there with a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hands and a plastic bag in which he had an old sweater.
John was seeing firsthand what he had feared all along. Not only was his father moving from town to town without a job and not much money, but at age 72, Bob Dupree, the former lawyer and John's once heroic father, was homeless.
What did you do?
Once I'd had a good cry, let all of it out, gathered my composure again, I crossed the street. I stood 5 feet away from him. He didn't even know it was me. I had to say, "Dad, it's me." Then he bolted upright, threw his arms open, and we embraced. Then he realized, holy hell, this kid's here to confront me.
But before John could make his father listen to 20 years of questions, he wanted to get to know him. And so for the next 2 weeks, father and son spent every day together just getting by on the streets of San Diego.
He had a buddy who had a room rented for a month in the Pickwick Hotel, which was the downtown flop house in San Diego, and we slept on his floor. I mean, you know, you survive from hour to hour out there on the street.
Bob Dupree remembers those 2 weeks.
He came all the way from Boston to find out why I left him when he was 15 years old.
And given all that had happened and what John had bottled up inside of him, there was bound to be a confrontation.
I started asking the questions. Dad, why did you leave us? Where did you go? How come you never sent money? Didn't you think that we might get hungry? And why are you homeless now?
He just more or less says, you will tell me this before we leave this place.
Did he ever answer your question when you said, why did you leave us?
Oh, no. I plead the fifth. Leave me alone about why I choose to live the way I live. It's none of your business. And I snapped. I grabbed him by the lapels, and I began shouting, "Answer my questions." I shook him so hard his jaw dropped open and his eyes rolled back in his head.
John had to be pulled off his father.
I could have killed him for all I knew. I could have. I was that angry.
Did he ever say anything?
Well, I finally picked him up, dragged him over to a bench in this little park area, and we sat there. We sat there for 4 hours. Nobody spoke a word until he spoke.
What'd he say?
He said, "I'm sorry." He finally said, "I'm sorry."
In that one moment, John says he found his father and forgiveness.
I knew he meant it when he said he was sorry. And I forgave him right then and there, without deciding to forgive him. It just happened.
You told him you were sorry?
Of course I said. I hope to God knows that I'm sorry for doing that to John and my other children.
Did you mean it?
I certainly did. I know I'm selfish and I'm egotistical. I know all that.
When we caught up with Bob Dupree recently, he was in Tucson, Arizona.
So this is your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Still on the streets, smoking a lot of marijuana.
All I'm looking for is the next meal and the next joint.
Still barely getting by on monthly government checks.
That's your suitcase?
That's my Samsonite.
Is that everything you've got?
Yeah, this is it.
Tell me, what's your life like?
Great.
Living out here, you like it?
I love it. Hello, Buck. Well, actually, I'm popular out here.
All right, how are you? They throw them cookies down here.
I'm well known.
Do you remember me?
Yeah, sure. I'm called Judge, Counselor. Gimo. I enjoy myself. I have good relationships. Why don't you bring your blanket over here?
All right.
I still feel important.
Many people have tried to reel him in,
Nice butt.
rehabilitate him, save him, give him a place to live.
That includes John's two brothers. Daryl, who is single and a contractor, had even invited his dad to live with him at one point.
You realized there was nothing you could do for your father at that point.
Yeah, money wasn't going to help. Him moving in with me wouldn't help. None of that would help. He would still revert to the same behavior patterns.
Have the ball out here.
Mark, now a basketball coach, says he's come to terms with his father, but even at his age, Mark can't hide the emotional after effects of a child who was abandoned.
Mark, why aren't you angrier at your father than you say you are?
I wouldn't have chose another dad. That's my dad.
Still gets to you.
I love him. I love him.
Some might suggest Bob Dupree is lucky his boys even think of him at all.
Do you think you deserve to be forgiven for what you did?
Everybody deserves to be forgiven for anything.
Well, there are some people who say that when you abandon your kids and your
Well,
wife...
do we lead a sliding scale on this, or do we quote the Holy Bible, Bill? I don't care what some people say. I go by what Jesus Christ said.
It's a way to turn on it.
But John Dupree says he had to forgive.
Woo!
To have the life he has today.
We pray for Grandpa Bob that he'll have some place to eat today.
Does forgiveness make everything better?
You know what? Yeah. Yeah, and I can't tell you how to do it.
That is delicious.
I can't tell you what the steps are to it,
Daryl, where's that gizzard gravy?
but I can tell you this. I'm finished. I'm done. I'm not angry anymore. It's all gone.
Coming up, at 15, Tim saw his father murdered for $1.
My father said, "What's going on here?" And then I heard the gun go off.
It was my car. It was my gun.
Now, a devoted son is on an extraordinary mission. Just ahead.